Hello Kerbinauts, and welcome to my Let's Play series where we follow the history of spaceflight and have our own adventures in Kerbal Space Program. Today we're playing with the demo version of Kerbal Space Program so everyone can play along at home, but we'll use the full version of the game when our goals get a little more complex. We continue our adventure in 1945 with the V-1 flying bomb. Now, while this weapon was basically just a pulsejet aircraft with explosives, it suffered from some of the same problems we have in KSP while trying to get to space and achieve orbit. Now, the V-1 was launched off the ground on a rail like an aircraft. We're going to be taking off at the launch pad, but the effects will be... Now we're back here in the vehicle assembly building. I'm going to go up to the top right here and click load. I'm just going to load my 1944 V2. And we're going to modify it just a little bit to make it look a little bit more like the V-1. Now, I'm not going to take you through the entire assembly process because we've already covered that in the last episode. Okay, so I know what you're thinking, that this does not look like this. And you're right, I know. There's a really good reason why this has to look this way. First of all, I don't have wings. When I come up into the aerodynamic section, I only have these two little winglets, so I have to use what I've got. But this is a great time to show some of the other features of the vehicle assembly building. Namely, down here on the bottom left where we had our angle snap and our symmetry mode from the last episode, we've got these three buttons underneath it. And these are very important when you start building spacecraft that are going to do more than just fly straight up and down. Now you can see here when I click on this middle button, center of lift, that shows me the point at which the aircraft will rotate around according to its lift. Now these are wings, they will act as wings as they're flying through the atmosphere, so they will hold the spacecraft up while I'm flying through the air. But if I put just two wings in the front and nothing else, well, when the spacecraft is flying through the air, the wings will be pulling up and the spacecraft will just tumble backwards. We'll see what that looks like. Alright, so my goal is going to be to take off and nose the plane over so we fly over the launch tower, and then we're going to try and fly out into the distance here and see how far this plane can go. Now I've removed the other wings, and our center of lift is somewhere around here, but we've got all this weight behind us. So if we're holding on to here, and that's what's holding the spacecraft up when it's flying horizontally, we've got all this weight, well, this back end's going to want to dip down. And it's fine when I'm going straight up in line, but I'll try to nose it over and fly. And it does not want to stay level. Okay. Alright, so it'd be really handy if there was a way to tell where that center of gravity was. And there is. It's right next to the center of lift. It's called the center of mass. Now, it's called center of mass because when we're in space and don't have gravity, we have to refer to it as the center of mass. So when I click this, I can see that where I've placed these wings puts my center of lift right in the middle of the center of mass. Now that's very helpful because then I can turn the craft around this point, right around the midpoint in the aircraft. So let's give it a shot. And again, we'll just nose over the launch tower and see how far we can fly. I'm going to try and get up to an altitude of about 500 meters. It's pretty low. And now that our spacecraft, or aircraft as it were, is kind of balanced, we can fly. And it's flying pretty well. This is a good point to point out the gimbal down here on the bottom. So you can see the top is blue for the sky and the bottom is brown for the dirt. And generally when you're flying around the atmosphere, that's not a very hard concept to understand. This is the ground and this is the sky. But when you're in space, you need to know which way is towards the planet and which way is not. So I did put a advanced SAS in here so we can do a good test. So I'll go ahead and press that now, T. And I want to point out something, is that I have a little bird looking thing here. It's orange, straight line with a little V in it. Pull up a little bit so you can see it. That's where my nose is pointed. But that little circle that's chasing me, that's the direction the craft is flying. So even though I point the nose down, I'm still going up. And even though I'm going down here, So even though I point the nose down, that doesn't mean that I instantly start go ahead and hit the next stage there, which disconnected the spacecraft and deployed our parachute. So even though I'm pointing the nose down, that doesn't mean I'm going down immediately. The spacecraft does take a while to turn and start heading down. So that flight was around 400 or 500 meters, and we'll see where we end up. Okay, so after we end the flight, we landed in the water, no problem there. And we can see that our total ground distance covered was 12,816 meters. Now we did go up in the air a little bit, so it's measuring how far we actually flew. But on the ground, we went about almost 13,000 meters. The V-1 flying bomb had a range of 250,000 meters and flew at about 2,750 meters tall. So we flew at 500 meters. The flying bomb flew at about 2,750, and we covered 12 kilometers, and the flying bomb covered 250. So we're going to start flying a little bit higher in elevation and see if that helps our range. Now, as we discussed in the last episode, the higher up in the air you go, the thinner the air is, and the more useful your fuel is. So let's give it a shot. So here we are again on the launch pad. The spacecraft is unchanged. You can see my advanced SAS here, and then I do have a coupling ring here. I've set up my staging so that this ring blows when the parachute deploys. So here we are in about level flight, around 2,500 meters or so. So we can see that just by getting a little bit higher in the air, look how close we are to that shore. And when I look back, that spaceport is quite a bit further away than it was before. And we did go further. Even though we spent that extra fuel getting up a little bit higher, we got 16 kilometers away from the launch site. And it's important to note that we did 332 meters per second. So around 330 meters per second. That's pretty good. Okay, and the flight at 5,000 meters, we get all the way to the other shore. And we did just over 19 kilometers and 410 meters per second. So now the question is, if we want to keep testing and flying at higher and higher altitudes, I'm running out of gas here. I don't have enough fuel to get up to, say, 10,000 meters to test and see how far we can fly. What I want to do is I want to get straight up into the air to about 7,500, 10,000, maybe even 20,000 meters, then nose the aircraft over and fly in a straight line and see how far we can go with these rocket engines. And this is a great use for booster rockets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the structural, and I'm going to click on this radial decoupler. So what this does is it'll attach itself to the side, and I can attach other fuel tanks to it, and it'll appear in my staging like so. And when I press the staging button, this will explode. Small explosion, won't hurt the aircraft, but it'll eject whatever's attached to it. So let's get some booster rockets on here. Now first of all, I don't want to attach just one. We know what happens when we do that. I'm going to say symmetry mode, and we're going to try and put 4 of them on there and see what happens. Grab her right here and go like this. Now if I attach booster rockets to these, yeah, the nozzle from the booster rocket isn't going to burn anything. I'm going to come back here to my propulsion tab, and I'm going to grab these solid fuel boosters. Now I can't turn these off once they start going, so once we light them off, we're stuck with them. See, no problem here. So this is one of the hard parts in trying to make small craft like this, is that it knows that this solid booster rocket is impacting the side of the craft when I have it just a little bit off. So I can come up here and I can see a little better, and we'll stick it on right like that. Great. And just for some looks and for a little bit of aerodynamic, I'm going to grab our nose cone from last time and stick it on there. So we're ready to test. Okay, so remember when we were talking about when you start building larger rockets, you can't have them resting on their engine. So you can see me wiggling a little bit here. And what's happening is that this rocket is trying to keep me balanced. This isn't great. I think we might be okay for this time, but we really need to start using those rocket stands. Also, the staging down here, if we look and see what happens, I have 4 different stages. And first stage, we're going to kick off the solid fuel rockets. They won't stop until they're done. This next stage is going to eject all the solid fuel rockets. And the next stage is going to start the engine, the main engine that is. And the stage after that will eject the top off the rocket and deploy the parachute. Now, in looking at this, I can probably eject the solid fuel rockets and kick off the central one at the same time. So now I can get down to those 3 stages I was looking for. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to turn on the advanced SAS module, throttle all the way up so that when this engine does turn on, it's ready to go. And we'll see what happens. Now, these solid fuel rockets are very powerful. When you shoot them off like this in the lower atmosphere, they can start overheating sometimes. If you try to power a rocket entirely with these solid fuels, the heat generated from them will carry over into each other, and your rocket will explode if they overheat. But we're doing well so far. Up to 5,000 feet so far. That's great. And eject. There they go. They fall away and my central rocket lit off. And we're already at 10,000 feet, turning off the advanced SAS module. Whoa. Seems like I was going a little too fast. Alright, so I figured out what I did there. We were going very, very fast and had a lot of momentum going straight up, and nosing over as hard as I did with these back adjustable wings kind of flipped us around and the aircraft just became unstable, especially combined with the throttle set to full. That was a terrible idea. So you'll find that happens a lot with Kerbal. It's a lot of trial and error. So, alright. And I have been deploying the parachute every time as soon as we run out of fuel. My goal is to see how far we can fly at high altitude, not necessarily how far we can glide. One thing I did change is you look down to the bottom left here and there's tiny blue indicators on my controls. You can see me move the controls. It doesn't affect us right now because we're in the capsule. But that blue indicator comes on when you hit the caps lock key. And what that does is it makes controlling the spacecraft not quite so violent. It's good for fine-tuned controls, and that was definitely my mistake earlier. Well, we certainly are doing a lot better this time, so let's see how we did. Alright, so flying at 10,000 meters, we really got up out of that thick air. We're about halfway out of the effective air for Kerbin, the planet that we're on. And it made a huge difference. We covered 44 kilometers and we flew at about 700 meters per second. That's an incredible advantage over flying at 5 kilometers. Now, when we were flying at half of the height we just did, we only did about half as fast and about half as far. So let's see what happens if we continue this. Okay, so I can't fit any more solid boosters on this craft here. So we're going to take them off. I'm just going to set them aside for a moment. We're going to slide this up. And we're going to start with our first staged rocket. I'm going to come in here in structural, grab another stacked coupler. Now this is the exact same thing that's right here. You can see it puts a nice shell over that engine. Let's build another rocket. So this time I'm going to grab this tri-coupler. You can see now I've got a bit more room to play with. We can see what happens when we do 3 800 unit tanks. I'm going to come down here to my symmetry mode, grab 3 of them. And I'm going to grab the most powerful engine I possibly can and put that on the bottom. Let's just go see what happens. Alright, so let's see what it can do. I'm just going to warp till these bottom 3 rockets go, but you can start seeing these wings are trying to compensate for something. And as I speed up through the atmosphere, you'll see them. What's happening is the advanced SAS module here is using the wings to control the rocket from rocking back and forth. Now these 3 cylinders are loose attached to this coupler here. So what we'll want to do next time is grab a brace and tie them all together so we don't have such problems. Now our first stage is almost done here, and we're already at 10,000 meters. We're going to try and get up to 20,000 so we can do a good test with our aircraft. And brake. And now the next stage is ready. So I'm still throttled all the way up. And I'm going to wait till we slow down just a little bit. Okay, so that took a lot longer than I thought it would. We're coming up on 35,000 meters, and we're just starting to reach the point where we're slowed down. So I'm going to nose over, use our advanced SAS to keep us stable. And I'm going to put the throttle all the way back up to 100 again. I am adjusting the flight of the aircraft to make sure that we're not climbing during this process, and all I'm doing is I'm just quickly tapping the T key twice to turn it off, turn it back on again, because the nose of the aircraft falls when I turn it off when I'm pressing down. There we go. Alright, so we'll let this burn and we'll see how far we get. Alright, so we're almost out of fuel here, flying at about 35 kilometers, which was our goal. And we were doing 2,650 meters per second. So certainly doubling our altitude definitely did not double our speed and double our distance, because we're doing quite well here. We can see the launch pad falling into the distance very quickly. And so the higher you get, it's not just doubling, it's exponential. So we'll see how well we do. I am going to eject the command pod now. There's not that much air up here, so there's not a lot of drag pulling me into the spacecraft. We can see that the wings are still producing lift, and now that I got rid of all the weight in the front, it's not balanced anymore. So that'll tumble around in the limited air that we have until it eventually crashes. The air is actually turning the command pod as well, because it wants to fly bottom first into the atmosphere. So we'll wait for it to land and we'll see how far we get. You can see I'm still flying up here. Now, I don't have any propulsion right now, but just my pure speed is I'm actually exiting the atmosphere, so we'll see what happens. And what happens is you go so fast that the air can't slow you down enough. So we'll get into orbiting next time, but we've actually just accidentally gone to a point where we're going so fast we're going to get up to about probably around 120,000 meters or so. You can see I'm still in the air and it's slowing me down, which is lowering my final altitude quite quickly. So we'll see where we end up. Alright, so we've had a little accident here, and we're above 69,000 meters, which is where the air ends. Even the thin air ends around Kerbin. So we're in space now. our maximum altitude isn't decreasing anymore. I have it on 4x warp right now. So we're going to hit that 153,000 meters. So not a very good test. So flying at 35,000 meters, probably not going to work out too well for us. We'll come back to 25,000 and see what happens. Okay, so I've played around with the throttle a little bit to try and make us end up somewhere close to 25,000 meters. And we're about there. So I'm going to make sure that my nose is pointed down, but now my direction is down as well. We're going to come back down to 25,000 meters. And pull up. And I'm just turning the advanced SAS off for just a moment while I'm changing directions like that, just so it's not fighting me, because I can't overpower it with the control surfaces. And we'll let this run out of fuel and see what happens. Okay. So there goes the spacecraft. Uh-oh. Okay. So I did hit the space key again, and that means the parachute will go. It's blue, so it'll deploy when there's actually air to use, so it'll deploy automatically. I've never had it that close before, so that was interesting. But anyway, we flew at around 25,000 meters, and we'll have to see what our maximum speed was. I was too busy watching to see if the actual spacecraft was going to crush us, but we'll see where we end up. Alright, so we did just over 2,100 meters per second, and we covered 198 kilometers, so about 200 kilometers. Not bad, and it's pretty close to the 250 kilometer range of the original V-1, so I'd say that's a success. If you want to see more episodes of this, we're going to continue. We're going to actually get to orbit on purpose in the next episode, so stick around for that. Please give this episode a like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. It's the only way I know that you like what I'm doing and I should keep doing it. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.